I always believed that
I needed it
perseverance was
for
the
rent,
key,
Dad.
and this is
The metals
exactly
were
what
just
happened
sitting there
next.
collecting
Yeah,
dust.
Trust me,
That's
you'll
what my
never
son
believe how
told
it
me
all
when I
played
found
out.
out he'd sold my father's bronze star and my own Purple Heart for $2,800. What he didn't know was that the buyer would discover something hidden behind those metals. Something my late wife Linda had placed there 3 years ago. A letter that would reveal the truth about my family that I'd been too blind to see. My name is Robert Chen. I'm 74 years old, and I live in a modest 2-bedroom house in Sacramento, California. The house where Linda and I raised our son Marcus. The house where she died 3 years ago from breast cancer after fighting it for 18 months. The house that hasn't felt like home since Marcus moved back in after his divorce. It was supposed to be temporary. That's what he said when he showed up with 3 suitcases and a storage unit full of furniture 18 months ago. Just until I get back on my feet, Dad. Maybe 3 months, tops. I'd lost Linda only a year and a half before that. The house felt too empty, too quiet. I thought having my son around might help. I thought we could support each other through our respective losses. His marriage, my wife, our family fractured in different ways. I should have known better. The shadow box with the medals hung in my den, right above my desk where I paid bills and read the newspaper each morning. My father's bronze star from World War II, earned at Anzio. My Purple Heart from Korea, earned at Chosin Reservoir, where I took shrapnel in my left shoulder during the winter of 1950.
It was at that very moment I realized the importance of taking that first step,
that shoulder
no matter how
still
small.
ached when the weather
It changed everything.
The medals weren't worth much monetarily, but they represented 2 generations of service, 2 wars, 2 men who answered when their country called. Marcus knew what they meant to me. He'd grown up hearing the stories. My father, who died when I was 25, just before Marcus was born. How he'd saved 3 men pinned down by German machine gun fire. How I'd carried my wounded sergeant half a mile through frozen terrain with Chinese forces closing in. These weren't abstract tales. They were our family's legacy. The first few weeks after Marcus moved in were fine. He slept in his old bedroom. He job hunted. He made dinner twice a week. We watched baseball together. I told myself this was good, that we were bonding. But gradually, things shifted. It started small. He'd leave dishes in the sink overnight. He'd use my truck without asking, and return it on empty. He'd have friends over late on weeknights, their laughter echoing through the house while I tried to sleep. When I mentioned it, he'd say, "Come on, Dad, don't be so uptight. I'm dealing with a lot right now." The divorce, he explained constantly, had destroyed him. His ex-wife, Jessica, had taken everything. The house they'd owned in Roseville, half his retirement, his dignity. He painted himself as the victim, and I wanted to believe him. He was my son, the only family I had left. But then I started noticing other things. The way he'd scroll through his phone constantly, his face tight with concentration. The way he'd leave the house at odd hours and return smelling like cigarette smoke, even though he'd quit years ago. The way he'd snap at me over nothing. When I asked if everything was all right, he'd shut down. I don't want to talk about it. 6 months in, he still hadn't found steady work. He'd had a few interviews, he said, but nothing panned out. The job market was tough. He was overqualified. He was underqualified. There was always a reason. Meanwhile, I noticed money missing from my wallet. Never a lot. 20 here, 40 there. Not enough to make a scene about, but enough that I started keeping my wallet in my bedroom at night. Then came the morning last July when I walked into the den and saw the empty space above my desk. The shadow box was gone. The nail remained, a small hole in the beige wall where our family's military history had hung for 32 years. I stood there staring at that empty space, my heart hammering in my chest, hoping there was some reasonable explanation. "Marcus!" I called out. My voice sounded strange, higher pitched than normal. "Marcus, where are the medals?" He emerged from his bedroom wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair uncombed. It was 11 in the morning on a Thursday. "What?" "The medals. The shadow box. Where is it?" Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Defiance? It passed too quickly for me to identify. "Oh, yeah, about that." "About what? Where are they?" He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "I sold them, Dad. Last week." The words didn't make sense. I heard them, but they seemed to rearrange themselves in my mind, trying to form a different meaning. Any meaning other than what he'd actually said. You what? I sold them. To a collector. I found him on Facebook Marketplace. He said this casually, like he'd sold an old bicycle or some dishes we didn't need. I got $2,800 for them. Pretty good, actually. The guy said Grandpa's bronze star was in excellent condition. Why? It was all I could manage. I needed the money, Dad. My rent at the storage unit was 3 months overdue. They were going to auction off all my stuff. Everything from the marriage. It's all I have left. He ran his hand through his hair. The medals were just sitting there collecting dust. They weren't doing anyone any good. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. Something deeper. Something fundamental. Those weren't yours to sell. Come on, Dad. Don't be like that. They're just medals. Pieces of metal. They're our family's history. They're your grandfather's legacy. There my voice broke. I couldn't finish the sentence. Well, they're gone now. I'm sorry. Okay? I'll pay you back when I can. But we both knew he wouldn't. Couldn't. Whatever money he'd gotten was already spent, and it wasn't on storage unit fees. I could see it in his eyes. The same evasive look he'd had as a teenager when Linda and I caught him lying about where he'd been or who he'd been with. I locked myself in the den for the rest of that day. I called the local pawn shops, but none of them had any record of Korean War or World War II medals. I searched Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist. Nothing. Marcus wouldn't tell me the buyer's name. I don't remember, he said. It was some guy, John or Jim or something. Linda would have known what to do. Linda always knew what to do. She'd been the strong one in our marriage, the one who made the hard decisions while I tried to keep everyone happy. When Marcus had gotten arrested for drunk driving at 19, I'd wanted to bail him out immediately. Linda had made him spend the night in jail. He needs to learn, she'd said. When he'd dropped out of college after one semester, I'd wanted to let him move back home. Linda had insisted he get a job first. He needs to be responsible. I thought she was too hard on him. Now, alone in the den staring at the empty wall, I wondered if she'd been right all along. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my father's face and the old photographs I had. The way he'd looked in his uniform before shipping out to Italy in 1943. 22 years old, barely older than a boy. I thought about my own time in Korea. The cold so severe that men lost fingers to frostbite in minutes. The weight of Sergeant Miller across my shoulders as I'd stumbled through the snow. Chinese bullets cutting the air around us. The way the metal had felt when they'd pinned it on my uniform 6 months later, back at base. I'd thought, I'll give this to my son someday. I'll tell him the story. He'll understand what it means. But he didn't understand. Maybe he never had. The next morning, I called my friend James Park. James and I had served together in Korea. He'd taken shrapnel from the same mortar round that got me, though his wounds had been worse. Lost part of his left leg below the knee. Now he volunteered at the VA hospital and knew everyone in Sacramento's veteran community. James, I need help, I said when he answered. Someone sold my father's bronze star and my purple heart. I need to find them. James was quiet for a moment. Then, who sold them? I couldn't say it. Couldn't speak the word son out loud in connection with this betrayal. Does it matter? Yeah, Robert, it matters. Another pause. I'll make some calls. There's a collector community. Word gets around when significant metals come up for sale. Give me a few days. I thanked him and hung up. Marcus had already left the house, gone wherever he went during the days. I stood in the den and looked at that empty space on the wall. Then I did something I hadn't done since Linda's funeral. I cried. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from someplace I'd kept locked away for 3 years. I cried for my father, for my younger self, for the son I'd thought I'd raised but apparently didn't know at all. 3 days later, James called back. I found them. I grabbed my car keys before he'd even finished the sentence. Where? Guy named Dennis Morrison. He's a serious collector. Military memorabilia from both world wars, Korea, Vietnam. He's got a room in his house dedicated to it. Lives out in El Dorado Hills. Robert, he wants to talk to you. Said there's something you need to see. What do you mean? He wouldn't tell me. Just said to bring identification and any documentation you have, proving the medals were yours. I had my father's discharge papers. I had my own. I had photographs of both of us wearing the medals at various veteran events over the years. I gathered everything into a folder with shaking hands and drove to El Dorado Hills, 40 minutes east of Sacramento. Dennis Morrison lived in a sprawling ranch house on 2 acres. He was maybe 60, with silver hair and glasses, wearing cargo pants and a Marines t-shirt. A German shepherd greeted me at the door, tail wagging. Dennis shook my hand firmly. Mr. Chen, thank you for coming. I'm sorry about the circumstances. He led me through his house to a room that was indeed a museum. Display cases lined the walls, filled with uniforms, helmets, medals, photographs, letters, everything organized by conflict and era. It was impressive and overwhelming. Your medals are here, Dennis said, gesturing to a desk in the corner. The shadow box sat there, looking exactly as it had on my wall. I haven't put them in the collection yet. After I bought them, I did what I always do. I researched the provenance, make sure they're authentic, document the history. He picked up the shadow box carefully. Your father was Arthur Chen, served with the 3rd Infantry Division in Italy. Your service record shows you carried Sergeant Edward Miller to safety at Chosin Reservoir. These medals are legitimate. They're also clearly marked with your family's information on the back. He turned the shadow box over. I'd forgotten that my father had engraved his name and service number on the back of his bronze star. I'd done the same with my Purple Heart. So I knew immediately that whoever sold them to me probably didn't have the right to sell them, Dennis continued. The young man who contacted me, Marcus Chen, said he was clearing out his late father's estate. But a quick search showed me that Robert Chen of Sacramento was very much alive. That's me, I figured. So I was going to contact you and return them. But then he set the shadow box down and carefully unlatched the back. The medals were pinned to black velvet backing. Dennis gently removed the velvet panel, and I saw it. A sealed envelope, yellowed with age, taped to the inside back of the shadow box. In Linda's handwriting, for Robert. Open only if someone sells the medals. My hands went numb. What is this? I don't know. I didn't open it. It's addressed to you. Dennis handed me the envelope carefully. Your wife placed this here, I assume? She died 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Dennis stepped back, giving me space. I'll leave you alone. Take your time. He left the room, closing the door behind him. I stood there, holding the envelope, Linda's handwriting blurring as my eyes filled with tears. How long had this been here? The shadow box had hung on my wall since before Linda got sick. Had she placed this here during her illness? Before? Had she known that someday Marcus would? My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 sheets of lined paper, folded together. Linda's handwriting covered both sides of each page. At the top of the first page, my dearest Robert. I sat down in Dennis's desk chair and began to read.
And that's when I realized
my dearest
the key
Robert,
wasn't about
if you're
working
reading
harder,
this, then I'm
but
gone,
about working smarter.
and Marcus has sold your medals.
It shifted my entire perspective.
I'm so sorry, my love. I'm sorry that I knew this would happen and couldn't prevent it. I'm sorry that I'm not there to help you through it. Most of all, I'm sorry for what I'm about to tell you. Marcus has a gambling problem, a serious one. I discovered it 2 years ago when I found statements from his bank account in his car. He'd left some papers in my back seat after I'd driven his car to the mechanic for him. I wasn't snooping. The papers fell out of the folder, and I saw transaction after transaction at various casinos. Tens of thousands of dollars over several months. I confronted him. He broke down and confessed everything. He'd been gambling since college, but it had gotten worse after he married Jessica. He said he'd been trying to win enough money to pay off their credit cards, to surprise her with financial security. Instead, he'd buried them in debt. That's the real reason Jessica divorced him. She discovered he'd taken out a second mortgage on their house without telling her, and gambled away $40,000. He begged me not to tell you. He said he was getting help, going to Gamblers Anonymous. He promised he'd stop. I wanted to believe him, Robert. I wanted to think our son could change. But I've been married to you for 46 years. I know you. You would have helped him, given him money, enabled him. You have the kindest heart of any man I've ever known, but sometimes kindness can be its own cruelty. So I kept his secret, but I prepared for this moment. I knew that eventually Marcus would run out of options. I knew he'd come to you when he hit bottom, and I knew what he'd do when he did. Those medals have always been your most precious possessions. They represent everything you value: service, sacrifice, honor, family. Marcus knows that. He knows they mean more to you than money ever could. And that's exactly why he'd sell them. Not because he doesn't understand their value, but because he does. Because hurting you, taking something irreplaceable from you, that's the price of his addiction. I'm writing this in July of 2019, 2 months after my diagnosis. The doctors say I have a year, maybe 18 months. I've been thinking about what I'll leave behind, what legacy I'll leave you to deal with. Our son is broken in a way that we can't fix, Robert. I couldn't fix him when I was alive, and I can't fix him now. But I can try to protect you. I've done several things. First, I've changed our will. My life insurance policy, the one through my work, goes into a trust that you can't access, except for specific expenses. Medical care, home repairs. It can't be withdrawn as cash. Marcus can't pressure you into giving it to him. The trust is managed by my attorney, David Goldstein. His number is 916-555-0147. Call him. Second, I've changed all my account passwords and made sure Marcus isn't listed on any of our accounts. Check your own accounts. Remove him if he's on anything. He'll be angry, but he'll use your guilt against you. Don't let him. Third, I've documented everything I found about Marcus's gambling. Bank statements, credit reports, everything. It's in a safety deposit box at Wells Fargo, Main Street branch, box 347. The key is in my jewelry box, in the bottom drawer of my dresser, inside the little silk pouch with my grandmother's earrings. Show this to Marcus if he tries to manipulate you. He needs to know that you know the truth. Finally, I want you to understand something. This isn't your fault. You didn't fail as a father. You loved our son completely, and that's the best anyone can do. Marcus made his choices. His addiction is his responsibility, not yours. If he's living with you when you read this, it's time for him to leave. You don't owe him your home, your peace, or your possessions. You owe yourself the chance to live your remaining years with dignity. I know this is hard, my love. I know you want to believe he'll change, that you can help him. But you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And Marcus doesn't want salvation. He wants enablement. There's a difference. You've spent your whole life taking care of others. You carried Sergeant Miller through a frozen hell. You carried our family through my illness. You've carried Marcus through every mistake he's made since he was 16. It's time to put the burden down, Robert. It's time to save yourself. I love you more than words can express. I'm sorry I won't be there to hold your hand through this, but know that I'm with you in spirit. I always will be. Be strong, my darling. Be strong for both of us. The most important thing, don't let guilt drive your decisions. Marcus will try to make you feel responsible for his problems. He'll say you weren't there enough, you worked too much, you didn't understand him. None of that matters. You were a good father. You are a good father. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means letting go. I've arranged for one more thing. If you're reading this, then Dennis Morrison has your medals. I contacted him 6 months ago and explained the situation. He's agreed that if Marcus ever contacts him about selling military medals, he'll buy them, pay fair price, and then reach out to you. This letter was my backup plan, hidden where only someone examining the medals closely would find it. Dennis is a good man, a Marine veteran. He understands what service means. He'll help you. Get the medals back. They're yours. Then go to David Goldstein. Get Marcus out of your house. Change your locks. Get a home security system if you need to. Document everything. Don't be alone with Marcus if you can avoid it. I don't think he'd hurt you physically, but I don't know anymore. His addiction has changed him into someone I don't recognize. You deserve peace, Robert. You deserve to spend your final years doing the things you love. Woodworking in the garage, volunteering at the VA with James, growing tomatoes in the garden. Remember our plan? We were going to travel after I retired. We never got that chance. Maybe you still can. Take that trip to Washington, D.C. to see the Korean War Memorial. Visit the World War II Museum in New Orleans. See your father's name on the walls of the museum in Italy if you want. Live, my love. Don't just survive. Live. I'll be waiting for you when your time comes. We'll have eternity together. But for now, in this moment, in this life, choose yourself. Choose your peace. Choose your dignity. I love you forever. Linda. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and sat there in Dennis Morrison's collection room, surrounded by the artifacts of other people's service, other people's sacrifices, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back for 3 years. Linda had known. She'd known about Marcus's addiction. She'd known he'd come to me eventually. She'd known he'd take the medals. And she'd prepared a path forward for me, even from beyond the grave. This letter, these instructions, they were her final gift, not jewelry or money or sentimental objects, but the truth. The permission to let go. Dennis knocked softly on the door. Mr. Chen, you okay? I'm fine. My voice didn't sound fine, but it would be. Thank you for this, for everything. What do I owe you for the medals? Nothing. I'll call the police if you want. File a report for theft. I have all the communication with Marcus documented. No police. Not yet. I stood up, gathering the shadow box and Linda's letter. But I will take the medals back, and I need to make some phone calls. Dennis helped me carry everything to my car. He shook my hand again before I left. Your wife must have been something special. She was. She is. I drove back to Sacramento with the shadow box in the passenger seat where Linda used to sit. I called attorney David Goldstein from the car. He'd been Linda's lawyer for years, handling our wills and estate planning. When I mentioned Linda's letter, he said, I've been waiting for your call, Robert. She set everything up 3 years ago. Told me you'd contact me eventually. Come to my office tomorrow morning. We need to discuss eviction procedures. Eviction? Your son. He's been there how long? 18 months? That makes him a legal tenant in California. You'll need to go through the formal eviction process. But I can help. I've handled cases like this before. When I got home, Marcus was in the living room playing video games on the TV we'd bought together 20 years ago. The TV Linda and I had watched every evening, her leaning against my shoulder during Jeopardy, her hand in mine during the news. I set the shadow box down on the coffee table in front of him. He looked up from his game, and his face went pale. Where did you get that? Dennis Morrison. Nice man. Marine veteran. He bought your grandfather's Bronze Star and my Purple Heart from you for $2,800. Marcus fumbled for words. Dad, I can explain. No, I cut him off. My voice was steady, calm. Linda's voice in my head telling me to be strong. You can't explain, and I don't want to hear it. I know about the gambling, Marcus. I know about the $40,000. I know why Jessica really left. I know everything. His face crumbled. Mom told you? Mom left me a letter. She knew you'd do this. She prepared for it. Smart woman, your mother. Dad, please, I'm sick. I have an addiction. I need help. Then get help. But not here. Not in this house. I'm giving you 30 days notice. You need to move out. You can't do that. This is my home. No, Marcus. This is my home. You're a guest who's overstayed his welcome. I've already contacted a lawyer. The eviction will be legal and formal. If you're not out in 30 days, the sheriffs will remove you. He stood up, his face red with anger. After everything I've done for you, taking care of you after Mom died, you didn't take care of me. You used me. There's a difference. I picked up the shadow box. Don't ever touch these again. Don't touch anything in this house that doesn't belong to you. I'll be installing security cameras tomorrow. If you steal from me again, I'll press charges. You'd put your own son in jail? I'd hold my adult son accountable for his actions. I headed toward my bedroom, then stopped. Your mother loved you very much, Marcus. So do I. But love doesn't mean letting you destroy yourself. And it doesn't mean letting you destroy me in the process. I locked myself in my bedroom with the shadow box and Linda's letter. I called James and told him everything. He said he'd come over the next day to help me install cameras. I called the Wells Fargo branch and made an appointment to access the safety deposit box. I called a locksmith to come change all the locks on the day Marcus's 30 days were up. Then I hung the shadow box back on the wall in the den, right above my desk where it belonged. The metals caught the afternoon light coming through the window. 2 generations of service, 2 wars, 2 men who answered when their country called. Marcus left 23 days later, in the middle of the night, taking only what he'd brought with him. No goodbye, no apology, just gone. I found out later he'd moved in with a friend in Stockton. James told me he'd been seen at a casino in Reno. I changed the locks anyway, installed the cameras, went to the Wells Fargo branch, and retrieved Linda's documentation from the safety deposit box. Everything she'd said was there. Bank statements showing transactions at a dozen different casinos. Credit reports showing maxed-out cards and loans in Marcus's name. Letters from Jessica's divorce attorney outlining the financial devastation Marcus had caused. Linda had known. She'd known, and she'd protected me the only way she could. I called Marcus once, 2 weeks after he left him a voicemail. If you ever get serious about getting help, call me. I'll support your recovery, but I won't support your addiction. The door is open if you choose treatment. Otherwise, I wish you well. He never called back. 6 months have passed now. The house is quiet again, but it's a different kind of quiet than before. Not empty, peaceful. I've started woodworking again in the garage, building birdhouses and small furniture pieces. I volunteer at the VA hospital with James twice a week. I planted tomatoes in the garden this spring, and they're thriving. Last month, I drove to Washington, D.C. Like Linda suggested, I stood in front of the Korean War Memorial and found the section representing the 1st Marine Division, my unit. I touched the cold stone and thought about Sergeant Miller, who survived his wounds and lived to be 83. I thought about the men who didn't make it. I thought about my father at Anzio, 22 years old and terrified, but doing his duty anyway. And I thought about Linda, how she'd known exactly what I'd need, exactly when I'd need it, how she'd loved me enough to tell me the hard truth instead of the comfortable lie, how she'd given me permission to save myself. The medals hang in the den now, right where they belong. I look at them every morning when I sit down with my coffee and newspaper. They remind me of who I am, not Marcus's father, not Linda's widower, but Robert Chen, a man who served, a man who loved, a man who learned, even at 74, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. I keep Linda's letter in my nightstand drawer. On bad days, when I feel guilty or weak, or wonder if I made the right choice, I read it again. Her voice comes through every word, strong, clear, certain, loving me enough to set me free. Marcus is out there somewhere, fighting his own battles. I hope he finds peace. I hope he gets help. But I can't save him. I spent my whole life trying to save people. My sergeant in Korea, my family, my son. But Linda was right. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. All you can do is save yourself. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone who loves you leaves you a map showing you the way. The shadow box hangs on the wall above my desk. 2 medals gleaming in the California sunlight. My father's bronze star, my purple heart, our family's legacy of service and sacrifice. They're home now, and so am I. To listen to the next story, visit our channel, Hallowed Vengeance. Remember, family means love, but it also means boundaries. Sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go